Hey guys, it's Beer here and welcome back to another deck profile. Today's deck profile is for rewrite format and it's Monarch X-Sabers, which is more like sort of like a quote-unquote Monarch type thing where it's not actually Monarchs but it's tribute focused, sort of like in Speed Duels where they have a deck that's called Monarchs but isn't actually physically Monarchs. So basically X-Sabers were quite bad for a while. They were broken and then they got hit on the ban list and then they were quite bad. But now, because of I basically discovered a utility where they all actually quite kind of just float into each other or protect themselves or can summon themselves. So it's like it just makes a really good engine to go into like big tribute summons like Skull Archfiend of Lightning. So before we get into the actual card by card, I'm gonna remind you to subscribe because we are trying to get to 150 subscribers by the end of the year. And also I am going to be uploading more frequently. So if you want to click that bell to see when my latest uploads come out, that's great. Also, you can join rewrite format in the description below to try out cool decks like the one that I'm showing in this video. Let's get into the card by card. So this is the deck. It's obviously just 40 cards with a 15 card side deck. You can technically run an extra deck, but I don't think it's worth it. It's not bluffing, isn't that big of a deal. So let's just get into it. So we got free Skull Archfiend of Lightning. I think this is the best tribute summon monster. It actually has worse protection and a maintenance cost compared to Hazy Flame Hydra. But I think that the 2500 body is just big, just so big for dealing with threats in the format like Worm Warlord, like Elector, that I think that it's worth having like half the time protection rather than full time protection compared to a 2300. Then we got one Elector, broken card, doesn't really need an explanation, but in this deck it's quite good because you can just summon it, negate summon it, then tribute over it for like a Skull Archfiend or an Archfiend Giant. Archfiend Giant has a sort of different type of protection to Skull Archfiend, where it's got destruction protection rather than targeted protection. It's also got a good utility where if it's destroyed by a card effect, which you can just let it die, right? You choose to pay the 500 instead. You can just summon a Skull Archfiend from hand if you have that available. We've got Worm Warlord, probably the best. Okay, I said that, but this is probably the best tribute summon in the format. I made a whole short about it. Go check it out. But this is limited, obviously. You would run 3 of this if you could. But this is just a very solid way to basically just destroy your opponent's board, right? Basically a board wipe to a certain extent. So let's just we'll skip over the X-Sabers so I can go into the engine in more detail in a second. We've got 3 Black Brachios. Black Brachios is a really good monster. It's just removal, right? It's sort of like block attack, but on a monster. And given that a lot of threats, like the Worm Warlords, not like the Worm Warlords, that's actually a really important interaction. Like your Archfiend Giants, like your Skull Archfiends, they have less than 18 defense, right? 1800. So you can just normal summon this, change it to defense if it doesn't get negated by Skull Archfiend, and then just swing over that. Plus, there are other things it deals with. It's just a really good card. And then we've got 2 Sazank. Sazank's just a really good card. Doesn't really need an explanation exactly. It's just sort of like a good card. Because let's get into the X-Saber engine. So basically the deal with the X-Sabers is that they all either search into each other, survive for a turn, or add stuff back, or they're a payoff, right? So for like the sort of like the general engine pieces, we're running 3 Garsam and 2 Dark Soul. Both of these search. Dark Soul's a bit more generic because it can search when it's tributed over or when it's destroyed by battle in the end phase, while Garsam's only when it's destroyed by card effects, most notably Trap Hole Spikes. But they both have the same utility where they get you to your other pieces of the engine, and you can also recycle them with Rakigura. Rakigura is another sort of piece of the more engine type version of the deck, where instead of it being a specific searcher, it actually adds stuff back. And while it's got a low body, if you can protect it, you can always use it as tribute fodder. Plus, being able to add something like a Dark Soul means you can then potentially add something like a Guard Strike, which then, because you've got the Ragigura Engrave, you can summon it. Then for the payoffs, we've got 3 searchable payoffs in this deck. 4 searchable payoffs in this deck, my bad. We've got Guard Strike. Guard Strike's a free summon. It's got a good body on its own. It's 2100, which is like good, but I think that it's best when because you can summon it from your hand for free, and then you can tribute over it. I don't think running more than one of this card is very good because it's heavily reliant on you having other X-Sabers, so it's really good to search. But I feel like if you draw it, you can sometimes get into a tricky situation. Then we got Galahad. Galahad's sort of like, in my opinion, one of the weaker ones, but I think that the fact that it can beat over certain threats like cleanly, such as like a Black Brachiosaurus, I guess. There are things that it beats over, right? Because it's 2100 when it's swinging, but like the downside of it being a 1300 when it's being attacked is quite severe. Airbellum's probably one of the better payoffs in my opinion. It just being able to discard cards out your opponent's hand is just really powerful when you're going on the offensive. And honestly, you could potentially try to justify running 2 of this if you were trying to push the deck for a more aggro feel. Lastly, we've got 1 Pashul. I was running 2 of this, but I think the 1 is probably better. It's really good for tribute summons because you can just set it and then tribute over it, and then if you have the ability to like add it back with like a Ragagura, or with like Ragagura, you can then set it again, tribute over it again because it can't be destroyed by battle. The only tricky situation is if you get stuck with this on the field because they just won't they won't remove it by card effects. You basically can just burn yourself out over time. Alright, so that's the monsters. Let's get into the spells and traps. So we've got Free Bait Doll. I think this card's great. Just dealing with all different kinds of back row, mainly obviously traps, but like all different kinds of traps is really useful. Obviously, you can see in this deck there's a bunch of traps, and a lot of decks have a similar amount of traps. So I think that they've just been able to just pop them is just so good. We've got 1 Sword of Sparkles. This is a card that I'm trying out. I think that being able to remove stuff is really powerful, especially with the Galahad or the Guard Strike because they've got quite big bodies. I was running at 1 with the sword, but I feel like the issue with at 1 with the sword is it says at 1 because you have to control only 1 X-Saber, and I feel like not only 1 X-Saber, you have to control 1 X-Saber that's the only monster you control, and I feel like you're setting so many monsters and trying to tribute summon that it's not as reliable to pull that off as something like this, where you can just equip it, and then you can also add it back from put it on top, which is like, it's okay. 2 reinforcements, this is crazy. A lot of the bigger threats in the format, such as Koala Koalo and Ivagishki Livianima, are just slightly bigger than your Skull Archfiend. Like, they'll be like 28, or... No, they're both 28. So this can just put you up to 3k, which means you can either beat over those, or with this case of Roy Jumbo Drill, you can just attack and crash, which is still a better trade because the Jumbo Drill has effect protection and you can only out it with Sazank otherwise. 3 interdimensional, this is really important for tribute plays and also with Rankagura. Basically, it just means that you can just get rid of a monster. Sure, they can attack you directly or attack into your other monsters, but because it's not on the field, it means it'll guaranteed come back in the end phase, which then means you can tribute it for sure. Plus, you can protect your monsters that are smaller, like Ragagura, so then you can use them for tribute fodder. We got 2 Trapalva Spikes. Most used card in the format for starters. Potentially, arguably the best card in the format. Definitely the most important card. But we're running it here because it just lets you. It protects your monsters again, right? It means you can more easily set up a tribute summon. Limit Reverse is broken in this deck. It's obviously a really good card, right? Of course, that's why it's limited. But reviving Ragagura or Dark Soul is so good because you get to reuse the effects, which then means you can just get more and more value, and it just snowballs. Free Saber Hull. This is another utility card for the X-Saber Engine. If you just happen to end on an X-Saber like a face-up Dark Soul or a Garson, this can just basically just say no summon for you, which then lets you go next turn to go into a tribute summon. And we've got 2 Destruction Jammer. This is again more so protection type stuff, where your big monsters, sure, you can have like a Skull Archfiend, but like, for example, Trap Hole doesn't target, so this can just protect your Skull Archfiend just from anything. So in the side deck, we've actually got like 5 alternate Monarchs. So these are cards you can swap out for the Skull Archfiend thing. We've got 2 BS Tetran and 3 Crystal Core. Tetran is back row removal. I don't think there are actually that many good decks that are heavily reliant on back row. I think the only real one is Ninja right now. And you could always side in your other back row hate for Ninja. But I feel like this is just a good option in case you're up against something like, I guess, Stall. And you can just tribute some of this and then pop some of it, and that can just like disrupt the whole turn going forward. We've got free Crystal Core. This card's crazy. It's sort of like a Brachios, but like a Tribute Summon monster, and it's repeatable. I feel like it's a bit niche because there are certain cards that resist it, obviously, like the big weight sticks, like Jumbo Drill. But this card actually outs some things that aren't outed by Brachios. Like this outs Wormlord, this outs Elector. This does not out Tetron, but it outs things that aren't outed by those, so it can be like a very useful piece to just deal with those basically. Plus, importantly, while BS Tetron requires you to remove a counter for the effect, Crystal Core doesn't, which means that it can survive 3 turns fairly easily. We got free Drillroid. Drillroid's crazy. So basically what Drillroid's utility is that there are a lot of decks that just set pass. And Drillroid can just punish those decks so hard. Hitting Sazank with this is just super powerful. There are obviously cards that still trigger, like if your opponent set a Dark Soul, it still would activate in the end phase. But just the powerfulness of just being able to pop a back row, a set monster, right? It's just so useful. I'm running it in the side deck because I feel like, while yes, most decks set monsters, there are still some decks that only set Sazank, and in those decks you would rather just not be playing it as much as, say, something like Brachios. We've got 2 Twister. Twister's just prime back removal. There are decks that require face-up cards, and Ninjas come to mind as a notable one. And this just basically says no to your duplication, for example, which can be really useful thing because they've already tributed the monster, and now they just lose it effectively. We got 2 double Cyclone. This is also back row removal. It's more utility type thing, but because it pops more stuff, obviously, but it also requires you to lose some in return. I feel like it's fine, but I feel like you'd rather be running Bait Doll for that same option. But if you want to side in more back row hate, this is a good option alongside Tetron. And lastly, we've got free Poseidon Wave. Poseidon Wave is just a very good stall trap. It's sort of like Trampoline Spikes in the sense that it buys you a turn to let you go into a Tribute Summon. But it doesn't really gain advantage because it doesn't pop a monster. It's good in certain matchups, I believe. So that's the deck profile, guys. I might upload some gameplay with this on another day. But for now, thanks for watching. Remember to join Rewrite Format, subscribe to the channel. We're aiming to get 150 subscribers before the end of the year. Hit the bell. We're going to be uploading at least twice a week. This is the second upload for the week, of course. And bye.